Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Veteran Experience. Today, we are in Washington, D.C. for our first guest, former Under Secretary of Benefits for the Veterans Affairs, Dr. Paul R. Lawrence.
My name is Paul Lawrence. I was raised in an Army family. My father was a career Army officer, spent 24 years in the Army. So we were a military family, moving every 3 years. I spent a third of my life overseas by the time I was 18, lived in Germany and in Belgium. So that greatly influenced me. When I went to college, I joined ROTC and I served in the Army for 3 years. Then I got out and I became a consultant in and around Washington, D.C., consulting to the federal government. I did that for most of my life. The last 3 years or so, I ended up joining the VA. I was the Under Secretary of Benefits and I ran the Veterans Benefits Administration. So I'm primarily a private sector businessman who had the opportunity to serve veterans by coming to work at the VA. Sure. So in the military, I had a kind of unusual experience. I delayed my ROTC commitment so I could go to graduate school. So I went to graduate school for 4 years and got my PhD in economics. And by the time I came out, they looked at my credentials and said, really, we have this very interesting assignment for somebody. And I now was in the finance corps. When I was commissioned, I was in air defense artillery. But afterwards, they said, hey, you look like you'd be in the finance corps. So they put me in the finance corps. When they saw my degrees, I served in a special office, was called the Army Procurement Research Office in Fort Lee, Virginia, that did studies about how the government bought things. I went to airborne school, so I was in fact airborne qualified. And I always imagined that had I continued in the military, I would have to leave the finance corps and join the infantry. And that was the decision I was facing as my commitment was coming to an end. But I met the woman who I eventually married, and she said, I'm moving to Washington, D.C. I don't see the military in my future. So I ended up leaving, and that worked out well, too. Looking at your credentials and your background, we think you'd be really good. So I did, but I imagine they get thousands of resumes, and I would have honored my promise to my friend, but I wouldn't get selected. So I got invited to interview, big commissions called, got interviewed, and eventually was selected by the White House and confirmed, and then nominated and then confirmed by the Senate. And so it was a great experience. I was really excited at the time to give back to veterans, and it was an exciting time to come to the VA. If you remember, then President Trump really made veterans at the center of his administration. He talked about it all the time. While we were there, the budget grew tremendously, new tools, new laws, and it was really just an energizing time. The team at the VA at the very senior level was primarily veterans and really working hard to do, things for veterans. So it was a really interesting time to be there. There were a lot of new changes and the like. And so over the Veterans Benefits Administration, what I concentrated on was getting veterans their benefits faster, because everyone wants things faster, and more easy to understand so veterans could access it. And so that was something that came as part of the focus on veterans. The biggest memory I have is a period of time in December of 2019 where, for a long time everyone just thought VBA was a sleepy organization. They don't seem to be able to do anything. Well, in December there was a series of things that really helped people understand how good VBA was in the process of becoming. There had been a problem with the Forever GI Bill the year before, so we said we're going to take a pause and reset it. But we promised by December 1st of 2019, we'll have it all caught up and going again. And on December 1st, that was done as promised. On December 2nd, we promised that we would start this new program called Solid Start, where veterans would be called 3 times during their first year of being a veteran so they could connect with the VA. And that got started on December 2nd, just as we promised. On December 20th, we launched a new program to help veterans who do not get their benefits through a bank. It's called Unbanked Veterans, called the Veterans Benefits Banking Program. So veterans could have a free checking account so they could get their benefits electronically, and that began on time. And then at the end of the month, on December 31st, we started awarding benefits to veterans who had served in the blue water off the coast of Vietnam during the Vietnam conflict and exposed to herbicides, Agent Orange. So we started awarding Agent Orange benefits. And this was a law the president had signed in June of 2019, and nobody thought we'd get this done on time. Those veterans had been waiting a long time to get their benefits because veterans in the blue water off the coast had been, had access to benefits, didn't have access to benefits because they weren't in Vietnam. So that had finally been resolved and that had been done. So I like to think that that was typical of how VBA really could demonstrate to other veterans that, really serious about getting your benefits, really serious about getting things done, and is a group of people who really could deliver for veterans. Yeah, well, the TeleTown Halls are interesting, and of course, the pandemic happens in 2020. Nobody can travel, but the need for information to get to veterans was tremendously high. And so I started the TeleTown Halls as a way to communicate with veterans, and I thought it would just be onesies and twosies, but after the mid-April or so of 2020, it became pretty much a full-time thing where almost every night I would talk to veterans in the different states. At the end of this, I think we did 110 TeleTown Halls, contacted 5.7 million veterans in terms of who was on the phone at any one time, when you summed it all up. After the first month or so, I realized that just talking to veterans wasn't enough. You had to have people who could answer their questions, because often people would call in and say, can you tell me about my case, my file, or whatever, and you realize, give you some general information, but you really needed somebody to follow up with you, not on the telephone, be listened in. So we started having people who could help them, called the response team, to follow up and take phone calls and the like. So that was very satisfying to get people their benefits figured out and the like. And so for an hour, I could, as the leader of the organization, actually help get 15 or 16 people's cases done, their files worked on, and then everybody who left a message, people would follow up and try to work. So that was really helpful. But the ones that stick out in my mind are really interesting. One was, had a veteran call in and say, I don't know what to do. They're so frustrated, I don't know what to do. Phrases like that we learned along the way are often the code words for I might want to harm myself. And so when that would happen in this particular one, our team listening in, we tell them, hang down, we're going to call you right away. They called him back, and at the same time, they were trying to find authorities to go to his house. Well, come to find out, the house of record was in another state from where he was calling. But that didn't deter them. They found where he was somehow, and then they sent the authorities. And while they were doing that, they figured out that he had a firearm in the room with him. So they convinced him to put the firearm in another room, and the authorities came, and it all ended up well. But that was just done behind the scenes by people who just figured it out in the moment. That was exciting to hear about, to think about what it could have been, but it was interesting to see. VA is a large organization, 400,000 people at any one time. You think things are going well, but they're never going perfect. So by the time we were in the last bid before we ended up leaving, I was really working on two things. I really thought things should have been better for veterans. And by that, what I mean is everything all makes sense, but the scale of the complexity makes it very hard, right? The benefits are administered by laws. They're often affected by court cases, and at the end, they're just so hard to understand that you just go, yeah, I can understand why veterans are calling in frustrated. It is hard, and it's hard for the employees too, the big system. So the word I was using, this has got to be better. It needs to be easier to understand. It has to be more streamlined. There just needs to be a better experience, right? Everything can't be. The secretary at the time used to have a joke, it shouldn't take a lawyer to come to interact with the VA to get your benefits, right? So better was the way I was thinking about a better experience. The other thing, quite frankly, was faster. I was really concerned that as the world improves in speed, veterans want things faster. What I observed at the Veterans Benefits Administration was there were a lot of times while the veterans waited, while VBA waited to get something. So for example, file a claim, VBA would run off and get your records from this big Indiana Jones warehouse in St. Louis, right? Well, they would wait while that got done. It's like I'm saying, well, how comes we don't have all the records digitized and you look them up instantly? That was in the process of being started when I left. The other thing, for folks who filed for disability compensation, that you often need to go get a medical exam, a physical thing, they call them C&P exam, compensation and pension. Veterans waited while the providers were available to schedule. So the thing I was working on was getting more providers available so that you could instantly go get an exam to do that. So the faster meant reducing the time that VBA took to help veterans. So that was kind of what I was working on. I hope that momentum continues, because I do think veterans have increasingly high expectations, right? Veterans operate in the private world that's moving much faster. And if VBA is moving faster, but the world is moving even faster, the VA looks like it's falling behind. So that's the dilemma of serving a group, and I think as most people know who are veterans are not a shy group. They will tell you what could be improved and the like, and so the expectations for service, I think, are very, very high when you serve the veteran community. I think what was exciting about the time I was in office was the real focus by the president and others in the administration on veterans issues. Part of what he talked about the entire time, right? And what it led to was a bigger budget, which meant more resources for veterans, the biggest budget ever in the history, to do the sort of things they needed to be done. It led to new laws. So a couple laws were passed that he signed. One was it was called the Forever GI Bill, making the GI Bill forever as opposed to just 15 years, and a whole bunch of other changes that all made sense. That's something the VBA had to implement. Also signed a law called Appeals Modernization. I think most people might know you can appeal any decision VA makes. Well, that meant prior to this, you could go in a line that took 3 to 7 years to get you a judge to hear it. There are some ways now called lanes under Appeals Modernization. You can have this done in like 3 months. And when it was going well, it was done in like 30 days. So there were some really exciting laws that were being implemented, and I thought there was much more focus on veterans. So I saw a tremendous change. Trust scores, they'd survey veterans, do you trust the VA? Trust scores were the highest ever. I think they were 90%. So again, nothing's ever perfect, and there's always something that could be done better, but it really seems to have changed a whole lot, and I think the focus on it at a very national level really made a difference. First, it's one of these things like, get there early. The early bird catches the worm. As you think about transitioning, you've got to prepare earlier, 6 to 9 months before you leave, and you really do need to think about what that means. Not so much find a job, but interview for a place you want to work. Do I want to work here? Not, do you have a job for me? And finally, of course, I urge them to think about what service really means in terms of their civilian life, right? I've always thought about the benefits as a way to help veterans accelerate their American dream. So, for example, get a good job. You can have free college with the GI Bill to get a better job, and you leave without debt. You do it right. Your civilian buddies had to go to college. If they didn't have parents paying for it, they left with debt. That's a tremendous advantage. The other thing, of course, is the no money down home loan. You can buy a home while your civilian friends are saving their money for a down payment. So these things can be used to accelerate the American dream and the like. And finally, the other thing I would tell veterans is talk to other veterans. All veterans want to help veterans, okay? So if you ask them questions they can answer, they will. And if they can't, they'll try to find you some help. So I wouldn't feel this is an alone thing. And social media, friends, family, networks, and the like, take advantage of all of those. Because again, one of the things someone told me when I was leaving the military is the best time you'll ever get help is when you leave the military, because everybody understands what that is and wants to help you when that takes place. And since then, I've just been a business person and an author, and I'm trying to help veterans. So I wrote a book about my experience transforming service to veterans about my time at VBA, which gives an insight into how you manage in government and what goes on. I'm helping some nonprofits that deal with getting veterans jobs, as well as helping them become CEOs, as well as helping homeless veterans. And then I am doing some consulting with organizations that want to help veterans. But I think my experience has been pretty, life-changing in terms of I learned a whole lot of stuff about what it is to be in the VA, to run benefits, to see how healthcare is provided. And I want to help others in terms of the how-tos. How do I do this better? How do I get benefits? How do I help veterans? How do I make my company veteran-friendly? What does that really mean, and what can we do? So I'm really out there trying to help things like that. And so that's really what my focus is now. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is interacting with benefits. So you can go online, you get a form, it's very, very hard. One of the things I like to point out is there is a couple of places where veterans can get help at no cost. Okay, there's a group of people called service officers, veteran service officers, who will provide help to veterans for no charge. You can get a service officer from your state. You just find the State Department of Veterans Affairs. They have service officers who can help you through the benefits process. Other organizations called veteran service organizations, American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, VFW, wounded warrior, they also have service officers who help, and you don't have to be members to do that, get benefits and also interact with the VA. In many ways, they are sort of like guides because they know the different processes and they understand it. So they're there to help. You can also get help in the for-profit world. You can pay for help for lawyers and the like, and that's your choice. We're all Americans. But one thing we do point out is to make sure you do that they are accredited by the VA. That means they've done some testing to make sure they have knowledge, as well as do background checks. So there's a range of help to do there. It is a very hard system, and it can be difficult on your own. And the other thing too is a lot of the urban legend, oh, my buddy told me this, isn't really right. So get a veteran service officer. It's easy to find, and they're no cost. So that's one of my strongest recommendations. So we got a lot of that feedback from folks who served 10, 20 or more years ago, interacted with the VA, and had, quite frankly, a difficult experience. And when I heard it, I understood it was just terrible. But what I'd say is give the VA a second chance. It is a different and better place, and a lot of that feedback has been understood. So I would suggest, please come back one more time and try. It is different. One of the things that now is different most recently is access to community care. So the President signed the Mission Act. If you couldn't get an appointment in a VA facility or you needed some specialty, you could go into the community. I got a lot of feedback of someone complaining to me, gee, I drive 4 hours to a VA facility, and in my town I drive by a hospital. Why can't I do something like that? So it is different, and I'd encourage those veterans to come back and give VA one more chance.